Welcome to the Mindcraft podcast. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I am here with the amazing Rishi Sood, who is a motivational speaker and a dear friend that I met in our mastermind group, the Rising Tide Connection. So, welcome, Rishi.
It's great to be here. And you know what? When you said that we were meeting on Riverside, I thought you were going to be beside a beautiful river and the sun was shining. That's what I was looking forward to. But then I see the platform is called River. That was my bad dad joke of the day. We can move on now. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, no, River. We're in northern Vermont, about a thumbnail from Canada. So,
Okay. So you got a lot of, yeah, that's right. You are
got
in
a
Vermont.
lot of.
That's
Yes,
right.
so the rivers are pretty much moving slowly right now under about 3 feet of snow. But
I bet.
anyway, Rishi and I became fast friends through our mastermind group, and I'll tell you, one of the reasons I asked Rishi to be on the show is he's incredibly motivating, which is great considering what he does for a living, and just so relatable and so authentic. And I know Rishi, you had wanted to discuss. You sent me a note about maybe touching on some perspectives about how sometimes things can seem seemingly bad in life, right? And they're often just detours for opportunities to grow. Do you want to explain that? Maybe elaborate a little bit for us?
Sure. Yeah, I think that, before I elaborate too far into that though, I think that what I've come to, and this is just me, but what's really empowered me in my life is understanding that our realities are really just a series of perspectives, right? And if you can empower your perspectives, and you can empower your life. And I mean, an example of that perhaps is uh, what is your own take on your value? If your perspective in that regard is high, then you tend to just achieve more just by virtue of the fact you're more confident to approach people. You're not afraid to ask for the amount that you're worth from a monetary perspective, from a business perspective. So really it's really just a perspective that helps empower that yes or no even about yourself. So when you realize that you don't have to change, I mean, everything in your life, but you simply need to have almost an audit or an assessment of where are your perspectives landing in a variety of different areas in your life that are meaningful for you. If you can empower those perspectives, that you can empower your life. And I think the best way to sort of illustrate that is going back to a short story that I share fairly often. I was 5 years old. My parents moved to Canada from India in 1987. They had me a couple years later. So I was 5 years old. This is circa 1993, 1994, 1995, around that, 5, 6 years old, somewhere around that range. So we had planned a family trip to Toronto, which is about 5, 6 hours of the outside of the nation's capital, or near the nation's capital, I should say. 5, 6 hours away. It was a road trip. It was sort of the first family trip that I could certainly recall, and we were going. One of the landmark sort of parts of the trip that my dad was highlighting was the Toronto Zoo. And back then, the zoo had a monorail or a train that was sort of their marquee attraction, if you will. At least going by my memory from when I was 5 years old. But that was what my dad was really excited about, was going to the Toronto Zoo, spending time as a family. He, myself, my mother. And that monorail, that train ride, was something that he was sort of hyping up, leading to the trip. So as tends to happen, you're on a schedule, you're on vacation, you're traveling, you're doing all this stuff. So we had a very specific window that we could take that train ride. It was sort of mid-afternoon, if I recall, and then we had to be on that train for that particular ride because we had things happening after and we had things happening before. So we really had that 1 or 2 hour block to experience that ride. So as tends to happen in life, things sort of just got bumped behind schedule, and we ended up being, 5, 10 minutes late for the train ride. And we showed up to the line. It was one of those things, right? And I'm again going off my 5-year-old memory here, but I still distinctly recall this. You show up in the line, and you know that you're late, and there's passengers already getting on the train. It's kind of like you're eyeing things, right? It's like, are we going to get on? Are we not going to get on? Right? It's sort of like so. No joke. We were my father and my mother. I believe she was with us. I can't recall, but I certainly remember my father and I. We were quite literally the last people in the line that we were the last people to not get in, if that makes sense, right? So the people right in
Right, right,
front of
right.
us got in, then they'd run out of space in the train. So and there were people behind us, a few people, and I remember my dad being disappointed, and I was disappointed because we were both looking forward to it, and we had no choice but to kind of go on with our day, and we kind of again we're disappointed by missing that train ride. But later that day, we came to realize that that train that we had missed ended up colliding with another train. And they actually shut down that entire attraction right after that event at the Toronto Zoo. And you can look it up. And again, 94, 95, summertime, you can even Google it.
Right, right.
94 Toronto Zoo train ride, something like that. Those keywords, and you can read up on it. But and the realization didn't come to me at the time because I was 5 years old. But certainly later in life, as you start to reflect, hopefully, on different experiences and scenarios that have unfolded for you, I really came to the realization that the trains that we miss in life, and I'm speaking a little broader than little literal trains at this point, the opportunities, the promotion that we were passed up upon, the relationship or the person that we were eyeing that we didn't quite make it past the finish line. Those trains in life that we miss, oftentimes we hang our head when we don't quote unquote catch the train. But what we don't have is the foresight and even the hindsight to say, well, if I had embarked on that particular journey, or if I had taken that train ride, or if I had taken that job or that promotion, if I had ended up falling in love with that guy or that girl or what have you, there's nothing that tells me that that would end up the way that I had interpreted it. It could have very well led me to a dead end. It could have led me down the wrong path, or it could have led me to some catastrophic collision. And the crazy thing about that was that on that train ride, there were many people that were injured. Thankfully, nobody passed away or anything like that. But had I been on that train, I was 5 years old. I could have been at the wrong place at the wrong time, and I could have. You never know what would have happened. So that applies to, again, from the realization aspect of this, that applies to the macro, the big opportunities, the jobs, the business, the people, but it also applies to the micro. Like how many times, and I've tried, I've continued to get better with this. I'm not perfect at it, but how many times I think a lot of people can relate to this. You are driving down a street and you miss, it's a yellow light and you miss the red pops on right before you pass the intersection. And you're behind schedule now, and we tend to be like, oh, of course, another red light. But you never know. If you had passed through that yellow, you may have been at the wrong intersection at the wrong time, and God knows what would have happened. So even on the micro, this perspective, going back to perspective, it allows you to hopefully take some of the brunt out of the seemingly missed opportunities in life. But
Right.
it also gives you hopefully a little bit of perspective to say, yeah, I missed the train, or I missed the bus, or I'm 5 minutes behind, or I didn't get this type of thing I wanted for whatever purpose we envision in our heads. But little do we know it was actually the greatest blessing that we could have asked for by not experiencing that exact scenarios that we build up in our head.
Oh, I love that. It makes me think of Rishi. I know, I'm sure you have stories too, similar to yours. And when we're swearing and cursing in traffic,
Right.
like on 911, people who are late to work that day were
Yeah.
probably incredibly, incredibly, grateful. And I like how you're talking about basically that our perspective is our reality
Yeah.
too,
Absolutely.
right? And how we choose to look at it. So that kind of rolls into, I think we've all had that experience too, which is so relatable. The karmic effort.
Oh, that's a fun one. That's a fun one. One thing again, it's going back to observations, and I think, and we didn't talk about this, Kim, but I think that it's important, just as we're talking through this. A lot of my insights, if you will, have come from self-observation and just reflecting on my life, and the seemingly mundane I found actually oftentimes have great lessons within it. The seemingly mundane, like your day-to-day experiences, just things that you've gone through in life, can often be the greatest arbiters for very deep learnings about yourself, about life, about other people. So going back to that point, one thing that I've observed in my own life, and then I've sort of anecdotally, uh, shared this with other people, and a lot of people relate to this, is I found that in business and in life that if you put in X amount of effort towards a particular avenue or a particular revenue generating idea, what have you, oftentimes you won't get the result in the exact format that you expected, but
Right.
you get that result from some other weird avenue that you couldn't even conceive, right? So what people do often is they say, well, I'm going to launch this email marketing system, and I'm going to attract an individual type in this particular subset or this target audience. I'm going to send out X amount of emails per day, and I'm going to acquire new business, and I'm going to hit that revenue goal, and life is good. I'm going to sip a pina colada on the
Right, right,
beach
right.
at the end of the year, right? We build these things up in our head, and there's nothing wrong with that, but where business leaders sometimes fall short is they'll put in, I don't know, 3 days worth of effort, and it won't pan
Yeah.
out the way that they expected. And then they're kind of just like, well, I'm not going to put in any effort anymore because I've tried it and it doesn't work, or I got pushback, or people say my idea sucks, whatever, right? But again, going back to perspectives, if we can reframe the KPI, if you will, to broaden beyond what we think is going to transpire by taking this effort, by simply realizing that I believe that any effort you put in will not go wasted. It won't go wasted.
Oh,
Now,
oh,
maybe it's something,
100%.
you have to learn, right? Maybe it's something you have
Hmm.
to do differently. But in any case, there's going to be some type of input or some type of uh, uh, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And sometimes that reaction is exactly what we expected, and things are great. But sometimes it comes from a completely different angle. And again, I'll just share a very brief story. In 2021, I got very serious about my own prospecting. And I ran, and then I've taken a little bit of a step away from it now. But at the time, I was certainly very much focused on building my digital marketing business. So I'd gone to LinkedIn, and I thought that I would target motivational speakers because I have a background in the space. I understand it, and it just provided a little bit of a launching board for me to launch this system. So I went to LinkedIn and I tried a bunch of things, and in my head, what was going to happen was I was going to run this system. I was going to get X amount of replies. I was going to get X amount of meetings that would lead to X amount of sales, which would lead to X amount of revenue. But it was crickets. It was total crickets, like nothing, like nothing, right? Nothing,
Right.
nothing at all. And I mean, look, there was some interest here, but they weren't serious buyers. They were kind of like, I got this message. It seems legit. I can understand how it works. But a week later, when the meeting time came around, they weren't qualified buyers. They were kind of like, it's just,
Right,
it
right.
wasn't going the way that I expected, right? So I didn't get the X result by putting in the effort that I thought would yield said result. But what did happen was I ended up connecting with a man by the name of Matthew Knowles, who happens to be not only one of the most successful music executives in history, but also Beyonce's father. So, and our relationship, and we connected on LinkedIn. We got to know each other. We built a relationship, and it led to a great many career opportunities and growth just through that particular relationship that I facilitated through this system. So in my head, launching this LinkedIn prospecting system was going to get me X amount of clients on retainer per
Right.
month. And that was the scenario I built in my head. But what ended up happening was not that at all. I had failed actually very miserably at creating that result. But I created something that catapulted me to a level that I wasn't even conceiving at the time.
Right.
It developed my mindset. It grew within me what's possible in this world. I'm from a small town in Canada, so there was no way that conceptually
Right.
I could ever, think to myself that this is going to happen, that I'm going to. None of that I could have conceived. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, the original point, I should say, the karmic effort is when you put an effort into any discipline, any avenue,
Right.
and sincere effort, not just like, here's a couple email,
Right.
like
Right. Right.
sincere effort into a particular discipline, avenue, or what have you, you will get the result. But that result may or may not be what you were expecting. But oftentimes that result is actually different and greater than what it was you were initially anticipating would transpire. And again, going back to the initial theme that we've been discussing, it's perspectives. So if
Right.
you're someone who is so attached to creating this X result and you have completely blocked off the even absorbing the idea that this could manifest in any number of potential ways that are still to my benefit, then you're potentially missing opportunities because you're so focused on creating X that you don't realize there's Y, there's Z, there's G, there's all these potential scenarios that could unfold that are just as good or better than what you had initially anticipated. So you can't close yourself off to the ether, to the possibilities of what can transpire.
Rishi, you were singing my tune. I'll tell you that right now. And I know that you and I have, chatted about Deepak and, Wayne Dyer's another one and all Matt McConaughey's book with the green lights and everything. Would you say that an element of this, because we get close, like you say, we get attached to outcomes with our own ego and our own will, and I want it this way, and we get like tunnel vision. And there's that old saying that if you want to make the universe laugh, tell it your plans kind of thing. And all that efforting matters. I agree with you. It just doesn't always unfold the way we want to. And like you said, with coming up with Beyonce's father, it ended up turning out better than anything you could have envisioned for yourself.
That's
So
right.
you think there's an element of that trust the process thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's not enough to just trust the process, but it's you know that you truly trust what you're working towards if you can
Right.
take the action to do so, right? I mean, it's great to believe in yourself and trust the process, but the symptom of true trust is acting even
Oh,
when
yeah.
the quote unquote results are not manifesting or producing the way that you originally anticipated. You have to keep yourself open to, again, any number of potentials, any number of potentials. And I didn't come up with this quote. I wish I could attribute it to the individual who I heard it from, but it's something that's stuck with me for a very long time. What we believe to be our ceilings are oftentimes just our floors.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Hmm.
That makes me think of Gay Hendricks in The Big Leap. Kind of busting through that self-imposed limiting belief system.
I'm unfamiliar with whatever it is that you just referenced.
Oh, yeah,
I
it's
sometimes am very ignorant in that regard.
no, Rishi. I actually just learned of it myself. I just read it myself from the masterminds, tossed it out there. I didn't know of him either till maybe 4 months ago. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, he wrote The Big Leap, and he talks about that channeling you're talking about. And we kind of often have create our own glass ceiling unconsciously, really, with limiting beliefs. And once we become aware of these, once we kind of blow through there, the world is our oyster. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
And I like what you said too about it doesn't mean to kind of sit back. It means you're efforting, and being open. It doesn't mean,
Right.
in fact, Jim Carrey. I remember it was on Oprah when he was really young. He was right before Dumb and Dumber. And he was talking about this, what you're talking about, manifesting and the outcomes. He said, it doesn't mean sit back on the couch and have a sandwich.
Right.
And he was doing all this stuff, and that's when he got his Dumb and Dumber offer.
Right. Well, you do all
So
those
I would,
things, you trust and you visualize and you believe and
right,
you do
right,
all those things that you're told because ideally what it does is it instills that faith with you so you can actually take the action required.
right. And do you think it's also an energy thing too, Rishi? Because you're talking about karma, and creating action. Like I picture when I think of karma, I think of tree branches. You go this way, and
Oh,
then
very
these are now your choices, are the little ones. Instead of
sure.
like you said, you missed all that with the
Sure.
train, thankfully.
Sure.
Kind of thing. But do you think it's kind of that there's a role of intention here
Yeah,
when you're
absolutely.
out doing your thing? Like,
Absolutely.
how do you think that plays a role in kind of what you're talking about the perspectives becoming thoughts to things? You know what I mean?
Well, it depends. It depends how deep you want to go down that rabbit hole, right? I think that there's a variety of different ways to look at it. And again, it's a matter of perspectives. And going back to Wayne Dyer, I know Wayne Dyer used to say this frequently: is that we're not. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human
Oh,
experience, right? I mean, that's one of his kind of go-to lines. And just to kind of build off of that, I think that Kim, you and I are having an energetic exchange at this moment. We're
oh,
speaking, we're
absolutely.
using words. I'm one of those guys who uses his hands a lot, right? And we're exchanging ideas and we're having a conversation. But what this is, in essence, is some sort of energetic exchange where you will walk away with a potentially slightly different worldview. I walk away with the same. Like, we are impacting each other in real time as we speak.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if we can expand on that a little bit, then all of our experiences and scenarios are truly energetic in nature. So if we can not look at, hey, this is a person who's in Vermont right now on a riverside meeting, but rather we're energetic beings and we're having some type of energetic exchange, then life becomes, I mean, it almost becomes a little bit poetic, because for me it's like the energies that, like your mother or your father or your sister or your spouse, those are energies that potentially we have connected with through multiple systems and eras and, dare I say, universes. And we reconnect and we experience certain ways of being, and this earth plane is just one of many, an infinite amount of different type of energetic experiences that we can experience in this spiritual journey that we're all on. If you look at
Hmm.
that, life becomes, again, just a little bit, it becomes very beautiful, because it's also, what are the energies out there that I've interacted throughout my spiritual existence, if you will, that I have yet to meet in this life, that I have to meet in another life. And it also brings you a great deal of solace if you're willing to accept this as a premise. I lost my golden retriever, my almost 13-year-old golden retriever, in December
Oh,
last month. And for some
oh,
people,
sorry.
again, it's just a dog. But for a lot of people, and certainly what I subscribe to, is I grew a great deal because of Abby. She came to me in a
100%.
time in my life where I had a lot of anger in my heart. I was in my early 20s. I was drinking and partying a lot, and she kind of made me get serious about life, because I couldn't stay out late, because there was a living animal in my home that I need to get back
Right,
to
right,
and
right.
take care of and make. So she really helped me grow up, and she really, I mean, she made me laugh every single day. She healed my heart. Like I said, she just put me on a completely different trajectory in my life, and I owe a great deal to that animal, to that energy, to that exchange that we were talking about. I grew a great deal because of her, and for me, the love is not just pet human. It's She was a source of great learning and teaching,
Oh,
and all types of positive things for me. And I would love to believe that energetically, somewhere in some time, in some capacity, that we'll reconnect with the people that have meant so much to us. So, I mean, again, all of these things, they tie back to that initial theme about perspectives. It's, what is the story I'm telling myself, and
mm-hmm,
are the
mm-hmm.
stories I'm telling myself, are they empowering me, or are they degrading me? Are they degrading my spirit? Are they degrading my belief? Are they tearing down my faith? We have that power as human beings to say, this is the story I choose to accept. And I highly recommend that we almost exclusively, as best as we can, accept stories that uplift us rather than tear us down.
Well, you're preaching right to the choir, as they say, Rishi. With both the golden retriever story, because we're golden retriever people too,
How are you?
and also, oh yeah, Giovanni. Giovanni and I are in the woods every day, and I understand your. I feel badly for you because I understand your heart. They are spirits wearing a different outfit, as far as I'm
Right,
concerned. I
right.
think golden retrievers are angels, and of course other dogs. We're golden retriever people, but they're angels, and we lost one a long time ago. It was a crisis I was in, so I feel you. It's very deep, and I really understand that. And I'm thinking of what you're along the lines of what you're saying, Rishi, is Tony Robbins also talks a lot about, and it's in his shorts, those little 90-second things. He's like, your life is what you choose to focus on, and he kind of makes light of it. Like, if you're in your own happy place, focusing on only what's going well for you, who else knows the difference?
Sure.
You're in your
Totally.
gratitude world.
Totally. Totally.
Totally, I kind of live that, to be truthful.
Absolutely. And you can play these games with yourself. There's no rule book that says you can't tweak your thinking to your favor. A lot of people, like, they have this thing that you're being, and I'll give you an example. I learned from the wonderful Dr. Alan Weiss, who is,
Oh yeah, yeah.
if you're familiar with Dr. Weiss, he's, in my opinion, one of the greats in the consulting world. And Dr. Weiss, what I learned from him is you personalize your wins and you
Mm-hmm.
depersonalize your losses. In other
Oh,
words, and I hope I'm doing his lesson justice because this is my interpretation. I hope I'm doing his lesson justice. But what I've learned from that philosophy is that when you achieve something that's monumental to you, you are
mm-hmm.
more than within your right as a human being to say, I achieved that because I'm ambitious, I'm intelligent, my heart's in the right place, I'm capable, I'm wonderful, I'm outgoing, I have a dashing smile, whatever the heck you want to tell yourself. There is no rule
Sure.
book that says you can't do that. And at the same token, when you quote unquote fail or you fall short, it's not because I'm bad, I'm unable, I'm not
Right.
smart enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not short enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. It's because there was some variable which I can learn from,
Mhm. Right. Right.
develop
Right.
the aptitude or develop the skill set so that the next time I'm better prepared and come back and achieve whatever the heck it is I originally set out to do. And notice how
Right.
most
Right.
people do the opposite. Most people do the opposite. So if you get, I don't know, a job with your dream company, right? Let's just say Kim gets a job for the sake of example with her dream company. Not necessarily Kimberly Quinn. Let's just say Kim. I like your name. Let's use that name as an example, right? So Kim is seeking out to get her dream position at her dream company, whatever have you. Most people will say, and let's say Kim succeeds, most people will say, well, I only got the job because Fred put in a good word for me, or because Sarah got me the job interview, or because my second
Right.
cousin is the
Right.
decision maker within the company. Now, all of those things may or may not be true and may or may not have contributed to that particular end result. And on the flip side, if they don't get the job, then it's, well, I wasn't smart enough, I don't interview well, my resume isn't stacked enough, I'm
Mhm.
not experienced enough. So, in other words, they personalize their losses
Right.
and their failures to say it's something wrong with me, and they
Right.
depersonalize their wins. So, even if you get that promotion, you're actually eroding your confidence in the process. So, flip the script on that. Flip the script.
100%.
There's nothing that says you can't play those games with yourself. Whether or not it's
Right.
accurate, let's put that aside for a second. If the end result, if the end result is that you achieve whatever it is you
Yes.
were seeking to achieve, then you're in the same place you would have been anyway. So we have to dispel this idea that we can't play these games with ourselves for the sake of self-improvement and self-empowerment, and also hopefully at the same time empowering other people around us. There's no rule book that says we can or can't do that.
No, 100%. That's another Wayne Dyer, and I think Deepak and many of the great ones say, where the focus goes, the energy flows, right?
Mm.
So we're going to attract, and you're talking about spiritually and energetically and all the other stuff too. If we focus on gratitude and what we're, and like you just said, Rishi, personalizing the wins and depersonalizing the stuff that didn't work out, we're also attracting more positive energy
Yeah.
all the way around. So how is
Yeah.
that not a win? And what you also added, because I like the part about bigger than ourselves. When you and I were definitely good vibes. We're walking around, spreading positivity and dumping value into the world. We're inspiring other people. Like I think of karma like dominoes too. Like
Yeah.
you know, and we're
Yeah.
inspiring other people along the way. How is that not great?
And Kim, I don't think I ever told you this, and I'm not sure if you remember this, but I think it was the last day of one of the masterminds, I believe in Orlando, and
Hmm.
I was walking out to catch my cab to the airport or Uber to the airport, whatever it was, and you were walking in. I think it was like the lunch break or something like that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and we had just gone to know each other in the last day or two, and you looked at me and you said, Rishi, you've got really good energy to you. And I've
Yeah,
kept
I
that
do
with
remember that.
and I've kept that with me, Kimberly. I really, really have. There have been instances where, something is occurring or something's not occurring, and I think of that moment and I think,
Uh huh.
well, Kimberly sees that in me, right? And you never know who needs to hear even the most what we believe to
Hmm.
be quote unquote insignificant compliments. I like to give compliments fairly readily because you never know who
Mhm.
needs it. We all put on this sort
Mhm.
of, I don't want to say facade, but a little bit of a facade that we've got everything
Mhm.
going for us. And, we struggled at one point in our lives, but now we finally made it and we're all these, and great, wonderful. But you also have to realize that most people are battling something, whether it's in finances, whether it's in relationships,
Yes.
whether it's in health, whether it's, we're all going through something for the sake of, I believe, for the sake of learning more about
Mhm.
ourselves, more about this reality, whatever you want to call it. And it's important for people to know that that really does make an impact for people, and I wanted to share that with you because I don't think I have before, and it was very meaningful for me, Kimberly. I don't know what sparked that comment, but in any case, I go back to it fairly often, and I really, really appreciate it, so thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me, Rishi. I do remember it, and I
Yeah.
just felt it, and I just stuffed it. It just authentically rolled out of me because it's true. You just radiate really good energy.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think about this. We were talking about golden retrievers earlier, right?
Yeah.
You've probably watched, Abby in the past. I watched Giovanni. Dogs can tell
Oh,
who
yeah.
has good energy and who doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
We had Francesco before Giovanni years ago. He's the one that went through my whole thing. Was very hard loss. He really, because he never had an aggressive cell, and he didn't get aggressive, but he had like a really upset bark only twice. And both of those people were not very good people.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, he was just slurping and loving and giving. He didn't actually hurt them or anything, but he was just not liking that they were in front of him. And
Yeah.
they turned out to not be the best people. And,
Yeah.
so I think you carry that with you. And I think that people, I don't think I know, people, I think we don't even realize that. Like you're talking about what the battles and all the things. We are radiating who we are, just walking
Yeah.
around.
That's right.
And other people can feel that, which is another reason to focus on the good stuff because it's
That's
it's
right.
it's affecting other people.
That's
Your
right.
good energy that you choose to focus on every day, you choose to focus on your positive perspectives, they clearly landed on me.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, and it's again just kind of going back to what we had spoken about earlier. Is just the energetic exchange, and
Mm-hmm.
connecting with people. It's even in the most mundane of interactions. You never know. I'll share this story with you, and I haven't shared this very often. I don't think at all publicly, but it's something I'd like to share more openly because I think there's some deep lessons behind it. In my hometown, there's a street called Rito Street. And Rito is not necessarily known for being the most glamorous part of town. There's a lot of homeless, there's a lot of, drug
Mm-hmm.
issues, there's a lot of that going on. It's kind of one of the core arteries in the downtown core of where I grew up. So I was walking down Rito Street, and I must have been 21, 20 years old. I was in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s. I was walking with a couple of my friends. We were walking down Rito, and a homeless guy came up to me, and he said, "Hey brother, do you have some spare change?" And I said, and I did have some change on me, but I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't have any change." And I kept walking by him, and then he said with the most almost childlike innocence, he said one word as I was walking past him, and that word was, "Please."
Oh.
And just the way he said it with just the most, like I said, childlike innocence almost. Grown man, but the most
Mm-hmm.
childlike innocence. It stopped me in my track. My response was both physiological as well as psychological, in that as soon as he said that word, I almost stopped mid step, and I almost took a second just to process. It was one of those things. It was one of those moments, and I realize, I think emotionally for the first time, that this is not just a homeless guy. This is not just, he may or may not be
Mm-hmm.
doing
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but this is a human being. This is someone's son. This is someone's father, maybe someone's
Right,
uncle,
right, right,
someone's
right.
brother. This is a human being who's had real life experiences. And I turned around, I gave him whatever pocket change I had, but he gave me a lot more wealth than I ever could dream of giving him, because he gave me a very powerful lesson that
Mm-hmm.
people have all types of circumstances, people have all types of things that they go through, but this is an individual who needs to be treated with the same respect any other individual would, you know? And maybe the truth is that you don't have spare change. Maybe the truth is that you don't. But again, a seemingly mundane who doesn't walk through their,
Right.
busy downtown core?
Hmm.
We've all had those experiences. But that individual, he humanized himself to me by saying that one word. And not only did he humanize himself, he humanized all of the people that are going through those particular circumstances in their lives. And I've become very passionate about trying to give back and be more open, especially with people who are struggling. It's very easy for us to say that this individual is homeless because of X reason. Little do we care to often recognize that had I gone through the exact same circumstances, the same parents, the same house, the same
Right. Right.
socioeconomic, if I grew up in his shoes, there's nothing saying that I wouldn't be in his situation or even worse. So who am I to come in and say this guy? That really taught me a very, very important lesson. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that the beauty and the potential for growth and learning in everyday scenarios are all around us at all times. It just goes back to the perspective of what it is you choose to identify as such.
Well, I just got a chill up my back because that was that when that please, I just got a chill because his heart spoke to you out of
Yeah.
desperation.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a human being, might not look like that, but is including myself, who doesn't know what desperation feels like. And it's
Absolutely.
excruciating
Absolutely.
and humbling. And that's what I took from what you just said. Like
Absolutely.
he spoke that with please.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just one word, just
Yeah.
one word. It doesn't take a lot sometimes to whether you're saying you have great energy, or I love how you execute this, or you're so
Hmm.
organized, or whatever it is. There's people, I believe people underestimate just how powerful positive praise and even just a single word can be, and how it
Hmm.
can impact how people think and operate. We all have that power over, I don't want to say over each other, but we all have that power over each other to say that we can all impact each other in a positive manner, no matter who we are, no matter who they are. It's just the perspective that we apply to those situations.
Oh, I love that, Rishi. And in fact, this is probably a good little segue here because I usually mention that off camera to guests when we get off, but I'll just say it now, is that our listeners, because I don't think I mentioned it, are international. They're all over the world. And so we don't always know who, like what you just said, this lovely show, we don't know necessarily who's going to listen and who's going to experience
Sure.
life change from it. You may get some messages from people. We're going to do that later and put that underneath. But they may have a life changing experience you'll never know about. You just have to know that you're dumping all that out there and that it's being received.
Yeah, yeah, and again, this is true for everyone. Like I think people underestimate just how far a genuine compliment and
Hmm.
appreciation can go towards people. And this is true not just in the kind of spiritual day-to-day, like it
Hmm.
applies to business as well. Is I like to very openly share when I'm appreciative of the people around me. Oftentimes,
Right.
company cultures, they don't lack from any number of particular ailments. It's the leaders in charge don't do an adequate job of sharing their appreciation for those individuals who help run the company. That's a big
I
problem.
agree.
It's a lot of times you'll have people leave companies not because they're underpaid or because they're overstressed or they're
Hmm.
overworked. It's it's because they're not appreciated for the work that's being
Right.
done. And you can lose a great deal of people just by, not offering praise when due.
Oh, 100. I was just reading an article on that actually. Because I go into business and do all that do all that kind of positive things in businesses, and that's the number one, Rishi, is the appreciation thing. And here's the thing. What rule, whoever wrote it, in granite on a rock, that because it's the business world, we have to leave authenticity out?
No, well, business
Who
is
said
personal.
that? We can't walk in the hallway because I think a compliment only also means something when it's really heartfelt. And
Absolutely.
why it would makes great sense to bring our authenticity into the professional world and say, authentically appreciate your team, you know,
Yeah,
your
well, and
clients.
that's something I've learned from Dr. Knowles, Matthew Knowles, who has at this stage become a great mentor of mine, is even at his level of achievement, he is not beyond learning. And he makes that very, very clear. And
Right.
that made, even for me, that made me a lot easier to accept that as well. Like I'm always now
Mm-hmm.
trying to learn new things, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm not afraid to admit to someone who I'm supposed to be managing, I don't know the answer to that. It
Right.
doesn't mean I can't figure it out. It just means you've asked me a question. I have no clue. I have no clue how to answer that. And are we doing anyone any service by pretending that we know answers to things that we don't?
No. No.
Because if you're sharing that as a concrete, and it may or may not be accurate, and let's say for the sake of example that it's not accurate, then just for the sake of seeking to appear more, I don't know what it is, self-assured, whatever the case might be, you're
Mm-hmm.
potentially putting people down what could be the wrong path because
Right.
you're not open enough to say, I just don't know the answer to that. There's a lot of things I don't know the answer to. I mean, I think every human being on earth knows a lot less than they know. Like there's so much to learn, whether it's food, whether it's fashion, whether it's business, whether it's music. I mean, there's so much to learn out there. So when you realize that and you truly realize that, you make yourself more open to learning different things and not being ashamed of not knowing every single answer. How could you?
Right.
And why should we pretend to uh, again know things that we don't? I'm happy to admit when I don't know things because it's an opportunity for me to learn something new and make me that much more effective as a
Right.
businessman. Why would I be afraid to admit something like that?
Well, that's because you're a good leader, and that's one of the keys to leadership, I think, is bringing that to the table.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I know what I don't know. There's a lot I
Yeah.
don't know,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
and be human and relatable, because I
Yeah.
think when we're not human and relatable, we cause distance between us, It's when we can bring that vulnerability to the table
Yeah.
that the strength is there, whether it's a power differential or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do quite a bit of work these days in the health and wellness space, in the medical space. And it's caused me to just realize how little I know. And oftentimes I'm speaking to professionals that are very, very high up in the medical or
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
have you.
Hmm.
And not once has this failed me because it's the truth and it's authentic. If I'm speaking to a physician, I let them know that I am not an expert in this space. I
Right.
consider myself to be an educated layman, and I'm committed to learning every single day more and more about this particular discipline. Doesn't mean I'm trying to become a doctor, doesn't mean I'm trying to become a physician, but I'm very,
Right.
very open in telling people that here's where I'm at in my expertise. I'm committed to
Hmm.
learning, and nobody has ever, snarled at me over that. I think people are very, very accommodating to individuals who are able to admit that I'm not a
Hmm.
pro at this
Hmm.
yet. I'm not an expert in this space. But through speaking to professionals and individuals like yourself and being open to what you have to say, I'm willing to learn. And that oftentimes
Hmm. Hmm.
completely, in many cases, bridges the gap between one's expertise. And again, it goes back to the confidence thing and the perspective thing. A lot of people will not take a leap of faith, whether it be a professional leap or a personal leap. They will not take that leap of faith because, well, how could I apply for that job? It's asking for 10 years of experience. I have 8.5, right? Or
Yeah, just do it.
I hit all of the
Hmm.
qualifications, but I don't have a post-secondary degree. I'm not going to apply to it. Well, no, don't do that. If you believe that you can fit the role, do so and be open about that. Look, I don't touch this little box, but here's what I'm willing to learn about the box to bring me up to speed as quickly as possible. I don't think anyone with a reasonable head on their shoulders is going to
Hmm.
fault you for such things.
No. Personally, Rishi, I think that says, number one, in the leadership role you're talking about earlier, that says to me I can trust you.
Sure.
If
Yeah.
you're, and trust
Yeah.
is huge. And it
Yeah.
also says authentic self-confidence. So how can you go wrong with either one of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. You give energy off in your
Hmm.
in your speaking and just how
Oh,
you carry
definitely.
yourself. And if
Hmm.
you don't know what on earth you're talking about, sooner or later people are going to get wise to that. And I actually believe that most people have a sixth sense. We have a sixth sense about one another. You can just tell when
Hmm.
someone is showing up and pretending they know what they're talking about versus someone who legitimately knows what they talk about. And the funny thing is the latter is more likely to admit that there's a great deal that they don't know.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
to your point, that's a sign of, and I'm not talking about me at this point, I'm talking about leadership generally speaking, that
Hmm.
gives off the authenticity because you're coming from a real place. And I don't think anybody could ever fault you for that. And if they do fault you for it, well, guess what? They've just told you that they're not a growth focused
Right, right.
business or person. And is that someone you want to be spending time with anyway? So why put on a front? Know what you know, be proud of that, lean into that, but also be confident enough to say, I don't have the answer to that. I have no clue what you're talking about. May you
100%.
enlighten me. I don't think anyone will say no. People will say, sure, let me tell you more, right? And by the end of that
Well,
conversation, you're smarter. It's win-win-win. What are we
it
hiding
really
from,
is.
right?
I'm a big fan. I mean, I'm what you see is what you get, and I think
I can tell.
that's the way to go. Because, like you said, eventually, as somebody who's hanging on to that ego-driven behavior of a facade, which is what that is, right? Eventually, that whole house of cards is coming down anyway.
Absolutely.
So really, you may as well have the like you say, coming from this place of authenticity, which says to me, trust, self-confidence, strength, honesty, all these things. Why are you playing around with all that false
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. And look, I mean, not all of us are perfect 100% of the time. Like you can make errors in judgment, and maybe sometimes you pretend to know more than, and look, in the grand scheme of things, fine. But I think as long as you have that awareness and that self-awareness and that willingness to approach
Hmm.
yourself and how you interact with as little bias as possible, you can grow and you can get better and you can falter less. And it's not about being perfect. It's just about understanding that we're all works in progress, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's in fact, it's a very beautiful thing. Can you imagine going back to reality and energies? Could you imagine if we all woke up in this reality and we had all the answers to everything? We knew when we died, we knew when we ate breakfast, we knew when the job was going to come, or it'd get boring. Like what would be the
Super
point?
boring.
Like what would be the point? Like I think that we're here, all of us, every single one of us, to learn something,
Yes.
something, or a series of things.
Adversity. Yes, adversity. Without because we often get kind of it's a tough sell when you're in it, I think. But without the adversity, we don't grow. And like Tony Robbins says, Rich, I know you're a fan too. Without adversity, we don't have personal growth. Without personal growth, we don't have happiness.
Right.
Plus, all the people without problems are dead.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's
Just
right.
a good point. So,
Yeah.
Rishi, let me ask you this, so we can. For the listeners, I'll tell you that Rishi's information. I think Rishi is mainly on LinkedIn, so I'll get that information and put that underneath. What advice would you have as a motivational speaker for people who are listening to kind of go, like some life advice to kind of go forward, whether that's business, relationship, or whatever? Because I think, well, whichever way you want to go, advice for them to kind of take with them as far as what to do.
Well, what's helped me greatly, especially in the past, I would say 24 months especially, is I try and face a fear. I don't want to say every day. I won't lie to you. It's not every single day, but as often as possible, facing some type of fear. And I'm not necessarily talking about jumping off a cliff with a parachute, right? I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
become a daredevil, right? What I'm saying is that in our day-to-day whatever, there's a series of decisions that we often have to make, and we get to choose: am I going to act in fear, or am I going to act in faith? So
There you go.
even just sending an email to a prospect who would be outside of your comfort zone, right? Maybe you're used to working with, I don't know, $10 million companies, and this is a prospect or a company that does 100 million, just for the sake of example. You have one of two choices. Either you can say, well, I'm not good enough and I'm afraid to approach and da 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 da. Or you can say, look, even if they quote unquote reject me, I at least took the step in faith and I didn't let my fear stop me. And if you
Right.
can do that often enough, just like anything else, it becomes a muscle. So over
100%.
time, it could be small stuff which you're facing, which maybe it's just, look, And again, we can broaden the term fear. It doesn't have to bring you soul-drenching anxiety. It could even be normally I walk 1 kilometer, well, for America, 1 mile, right? I'm Canadian, so I'm stuck in the, whatever you call it.
Metric
But
system. Yeah.
there you go, metric system. Um, you know, and maybe today I'm going to do 1.5 or I'm going to do 2. I'm just going to push my boundaries just a little bit more so that I'm used to. And over time, you keep doing that, it becomes part of who
Mhm.
you are. So when you reach those inevitable crossroads in life, am I going to take this career? Am I going to move to this city? Am I going to ask that person to marry me? You're more likely to act in spite of fear because you're doing it in your day to day,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's fear is
100%.
not this thing that you face once a lifetime and it's this big, gigantic. Do a little bit every single day or as much as you possibly can. Even if it's not this huge fear, just push yourself a
Right.
little bit further. It becomes part of who you are. And then when you do reach those big life decisions, if you will, you've done it so much that you're much more likely to not let fear stop you because how and you're obviously a very successful businesswoman, you understand this. How many people, how many businesses have not seen the light of day, not because they weren't talented, not because they weren't
Hmm. Hmm.
capable, but because they were afraid of someone or something or whatever.
Hmm.
So we can't let that happen, right? Or as little as possible. We have to move forward in a way that speaks to us. We can't let all the other stuff stop us from doing what we're potentially meant to do, you know?
It's fantastic, Rishi. What a great note to wind up on because it sounds like on my end, what I'm hearing is this is about exercising and strengthening your courage muscle,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Walking
It's a
right through.
muscle.
Fear doesn't go away, right? We're walking through it.
No. No. And in fact, what you'll probably notice is the fears get bigger.
Yes.
The stakes become higher. But guess what? If you're simultaneously growing, the fears you're going to start leaping across valleys because you're growing simultaneously. So what would have
Right,
been
right.
completely inconceivable for you a year ago, you continue for 12 months continuing to, face your fears as much as possible. Within a year, you will be able to jump off that cliff with a parachute.
I absolutely love that. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. What I would like to do then is say a huge thank you to Rishi Sood, my dear friend from my mastermind group, and an amazing, I've heard him in person, I know too, an amazing motivational speaker for spending your life minutes in this way because there is no greater gift. So thank you, Rishi, for being part of the Mindcraft
Thank
podcast.
you for having me. And I want to return the favor, the same gift you gave me, Kimberly. You are a wonderful person. You have wonderful energy, and you will always succeed because of those virtues. You are a great person. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right.